Mom Who Knows Not. My name is Brianna, and this is the Mom Who Knows Not podcast. Today, me, myself, and I are going to talk about me, myself, and I. Interviewing other people. I've gotten questions about my own experience moving abroad, what it's been like, how we've navigated certain situations, and so today's all about me. Our immigration journey actually started back in 2000. We were looking to move back to the UK. My husband was looking for new jobs and traveling a lot and feeling unfulfilled. So we started looking at different opportunities for him in the UK. That is also something that prompted our wedding. It was obviously easier to get visas as a family if you are married and not just a girlfriend or the mother of a child. And so we were married on March 7th. I planned our wedding in 2 weeks. And a week after we were married, the world shut down. So that changed our plans, obviously. We were living in Baltimore, Maryland at the time, and though it's my home city and I love it, it was just not what we wanted for our family, and we ended up buying a house in St. Augustine, Florida, still one of my favorite places in the world, and moving there. And we were there for about 3 years. And during this time, my husband lost his job. He was actually on an L1A visa that was sponsored by his corporate job. And it really changed a lot of things for us in terms of presence, like his presence. To be fair, he'd already traveled a lot, but losing his job and not being able to stay and remain in the US without a visa meant that he could only spend 180 days in the country and only 90 days at a time. So basically half the year, but only 3 months at a time. So we had to figure out a plan. Yay! And when he lost his job, he had to, exit the US within a certain time frame and then eventually come back. So that was an interesting situation to be put in. And then we started looking at, or he started, leveraging his network and looking for jobs internationally. He set up a consultancy as well to allow himself some flexibility, to be paid in a different country, to make it more fluid for him. Tax-wise, he's non-domicile in England, so that was helpful at this point in time for him. And then we started looking at our options. We started researching places that we would wanted to live, what would be easy for our family. And during this time, he was working with a former colleague on a project that actually took him to Africa, Nigeria, and South Africa quite frequently, and also South America. So during one of his trips to South America, we were fortunate enough to go for a month and spend time in Buenos Aires to see if we'd be a good fit for our family. And while I love Buenos Aires, it is such an incredible city. The art, the architecture, so much is modeled off of Europe. Their bureaucracy and structures are a little bit more fluid than other countries. And as much as I favored it, I could tell immediately that it wouldn't be a good fit for our family. As much as other countries' processes can be quite a headache, I knew that the lack of structure was going to drive him absolutely insane. But the great thing about Argentina is that, to my knowledge, this hasn't changed, is that they have a tourist visa that you don't have to apply for depending on what country you're from. And you can spend 90 days in the country without any other permits or residency requirements. And every time you leave, that residency or that tourist visa resets. So it's really kind of flexible and ideal in certain circumstances. So it was a great way for us to learn what countries weren't or were for us. We looked at Costa Rica, Uruguay, Switzerland, toyed with the idea of, could we live in Germany or France? I don't know French or German, so I was really nervous about that. And then an opportunity came up for him to be based in the EU for an English company, and that seemed to tick all the boxes. So we had visited, and the idea of living in Europe provided a lot of potential for us in terms of closer to his family. The idea would be that he would travel less, be present more. A lot of the business would be in the EU, so Italy, Germany, Spain, some trips to the UK and the USA. And it seemed like the perfect fit. The idea was that we would be able to have more family time together. There would be less pressure on both of us, and it seemed like a great idea. So we visited Barcelona and Valencia for about 10 days in March of 2023. And by October of 2023, we had all moved. Now, we applied for our visa in country because there's different ways you can do it when you apply for a visa, and it all depends on the visa as well. So we applied for what is called the digital nomad visa. It actually has a different name, but I don't know what it is. Sorry, should have researched that. But it's called the digital nomad visa. And so when you apply in country, you can apply for a 3-year visa. And if you apply out of country, it's for 1 year, I believe. Now, let me preface all of this by saying my husband was the liaison with the lawyer and law firms that we used here because he had all the financial data. And for those of you who are like, why didn't you just sponsor him in the US? At the time, and again, I did not double check this, I was told that I couldn't sponsor him because I didn't make enough money. As a stay-at-home mom and a freelance writer, I did not have the financial bandwidth to sponsor my husband to keep him in the country. And we had talked about me getting a job and going back to work to try to alleviate this. But with him being gone so frequently, we needed somebody to be very present for our child. And if there was emergencies, and to be able to do the school runs and, do the day-to-day, everyday things that needed to happen for our family, walk the dog, errands, et cetera, et cetera. And it was going to be really difficult to be able to function as a single parent and do 100% of everything. And so we decided that I shouldn't work and we would look for other opportunities. So that's what happened there. And at the time in Florida, I didn't know how to ask for help or tell people what I needed. I've always kind of struggled with that. So even though I had a good, great, wonderful group of friends, I didn't lean into them enough in retrospect and ask for the support I needed. And if you catch the podcast I did with my son, Declan, I kind of hinted at this, but I packed up an entire 2,600 square foot house, 2-car garage by myself. So yeah, a few opportunities for me to work on. But anyway, so the idea of coming to Spain was really great. There are certain things about the US that I love and appreciate, and other things that I could leave very far behind, including some of the educational principles that they have instilled, and a lot of the gun violence that is rampant in the US that just doesn't exist in other places. So there's that. But I have definitely said enough about that in other podcasts, so I will leave that where it is. So one of the biggest things that we had to move was our sweet, sweet, fluffy babies, my cat Diesel and our dog Dionysus. And Diesel has since passed since we moved to Spain, which has been really sad for me personally. But yeah, anyway. And Dio was the problem child, only because he is a big, fat, fluffy nightmare. He's about 45 pounds, he is about 45 kilos, about 100 pounds. So he was a very specific entity to relocate. He had to have a specialty crate because he's an odd-shaped dog. And so when you move over, you have to send in your measurements and you have to be approved. Well, the apparatus or the crate that they are moved in has to be approved by the FDA. Is that FDA? It's not the FDA. The crate has to be within the regulations of So when you move an animal abroad, there are certain regulations for the crates that have to be met. And the animals have to have a certain amount of space around them so they can stand and move around, turn around, and all these things. And because Dio is a Lab German Shepherd mix, he required a very specific crate size because he's not like a standard breed that has specific measurements. So that was really difficult to navigate. Specialty crate, all the things. Our cat also had to have chicken wire put around his crate because they don't want the paws to get out. You would hate for an animal to be in turbulence and have a paw through a little hole and get smashed by something else. And it's also to protect the people who are handling them or moving them. You don't want to be dogs and cats scratching and biting because it's very stressful for them. And drugs didn't work for our dog when we drove from Baltimore to Florida and moved. So we knew it wasn't going to work in a plane. And it's loud and boisterous, and it's a new environment. And so we did opt to use a third party to help move them and assist with the processing, because these people would take them through the immigration and everything like that as we landed into the different cities. And then we also didn't have a car in Spain, so driving from Madrid to Valencia was going to be a bit difficult with the crate and the cats and all, the dog and all the things. So what we did do is hire the third party to help assist with all the paperwork and get us organized, book them on the flights, and then be the liaison through the airports, and then also drive them from Madrid to Valencia. So they were driven by me to Atlanta, Georgia, and then they flew to Frankfurt, where they had a little layover, and they were allowed to exit and go for a walk and go to the bathroom and have some food. And then once they arrived in Madrid, they were driven to us, which was very, very fun. And then they never updated the address that I sent them, so they went to the wrong apartment, which was those poor animals. and there's poor people driving. And so when you send a pet over, you have to have documentation from the USDA. So the US Department of Agriculture has to confirm that these pets are able to fly, that they don't have any diseases, they've been checked out by a certified USDA veterinarian, etc. And these papers are only good for about 10 days. So within time the pets are checked out and the documents are submitted for approval from the USDA, there's only 10 days until you can get on the plane with them. So you kind of have to be checking in and updating and making sure that you're on top of it. And for us, we had to cancel our plans like twice because Dionysus is so big. Only certain airlines would take him. Lufthansa is what we ended up flying on. And it was so hot. They were having a heat wave in Europe. And so flying him from Georgia to Germany and then on to Spain was impossible because it was too hot for him to go in cargo. And we did opt to have both of them in cargo so that they could like sense each other and, have a little friend under there. It's stressful for people to fly. So of course it's going to be stressful for animals to fly, especially without your humans. So there I was in Florida, just packed the house, left. Then I had to drive my 100-pound dog and my very upset cat, along with my then 5-year-old son, in this huge crate in a rental car to Atlanta, and then navigate this situation, which for me was like horrifically stressful. When you send a pet, you have to go to cargo, and there's very specific protocols and policies depending on the airline. And so for Lufthansa, I had to check in by a certain time. I couldn't be later than. I had to get a time-stamped ticket. And I had to have all my documents. So everything that went to the airline also was shipped to the receiving team in Spain. And so everybody had a copy of these documents. And I had to take them to the airline. They had to be approved by the cargo team, bring the animals, the crates, and everything. Now this crate, it's not particularly heavy, but it's very awkward. And so for me, I found it very stressful. I couldn't fit the crate in the car, and I had my kid and my animals and chicken wire. So by the end of it, I was like losing my mind. And I was, again, very overwhelmed by doing it by myself and, juggling these 3 beautiful creatures that I loved so dearly. So I get there and I check in on time, but I didn't know nobody called me back, and I didn't know what the process was. So I was waiting. So I was past the technical check-in time when they actually saw me. And so one of the employees was like, I don't know if we're going to be able to send your pets. You might have to come back. And I was like, get on a plane tomorrow. I cannot come back. These animals are going. So I just sat there and politely was like, all right, well, there's not much I can do about this. If they cancel it, it will be a debacle, but it is what it is. Luckily, a supervisor came in and he helped out and was like, yeah, no problem. We'll get the animals situated for you. They'll be ready to go. And I left them in the hands of Lufthansa Cargo, as well as the third-party pet representatives. And we got updates when they landed and everything was fine and they made it to us. But it was just that whole, the timing, and so much is out of your control. And usually it does work out fine, but it can be very difficult. Especially if, weather happens or heat waves, so lots of things are out of your control when you do this. And then you just have to be flexible with that and know that, you have a budget to move, I'm sure, but sometimes just build a extra cushion just in case. You don't know what's going to happen. The visa, like I said, we applied for was what they call the digital nomad, and we did that in country because we could apply for the 3-year one again. And so our visa was actually denied the first time. My husband had applied for it solo and then was gonna add myself and my son as the subordinates to it because whatever the process was. Again, I did not liaise on this. But so we decided to appeal and resubmit as a family, and then we were approved by default. So we sent it in November, and we were approved by default in early January. And basically what that meant was, at the time for this particular visa, Spain had 60 days to respond to our appeal, or it was approved just because. And so that's what happened. This law has since changed. So we did get lucky. And so thank God for that. And so our visa is good for 3 years, and it will expire next February, and we have to renew. There's another visa. There's lots of visas. So there's different things to consider when you're moving here. It's why you want to move here, what opportunities you have, and what do your finances look like. If you're looking to live and work here, that's one thing. You can get a visa if you work for a Spanish company and they're willing to help support you or go through that process with you, or an EU company, depending. And if you can work remotely, that would be something similar to the digital nomad visa if you wanted to live in Spain. But again, it's always good to research your options, and Escape America can really help with that. Put you in contact with the right lawyers, people, or just give you insights. There's one that a lot of our friends started on, and that is a non-lucrative visa, the NLV. And this one's very specific. So you cannot work within the boundaries of Spain. So you can work for a company outside of Spain and collect your paycheck per se. You can work for a US company, but you cannot be working in Spain. That means like remotely as well. So if you are working, but you're working outside and like you're traveling back and forth, you're living here, but working in Germany or whatever it is, that is acceptable. But to have like a residency, but you theoretically cannot be physically working in Spain. So just a little note there. It has to be happening outside. The non-lucrative visa is really popular with retirees as well, or people who have like a recurring income. So rental properties, trust fund, or what's the word I'm looking for? Retirement funds, 401k, something where you have access to money that does not require you to go to a job. So there's loopholes to this as well, but like I said, the general practice is you cannot be working in Spain. So that's just a good note to have. Apartments here have become increasingly difficult to obtain. It's very competitive. I'm finding good ones, updated ones, or just quality ones with good landlords. There's certain landlords who are trying to manipulate the system and really take advantage of tourists as well as the locals. And this is why you see a lot of the tourists go home. And that negative parameter, but it's not so much they don't want us here. It's more like they don't like how it's destroying the local infrastructure and how it's destroying the local ability to live, because European salaries are much less, especially in Spain, than what we consider a good salary in the US. So many friends here only make around 1,500 to 2,000 euros a month, and that's pretty standard. So if your rent is 1,500 euros, like you can't buy food. And so this is like a standard Spanish salary, an average Spanish salary, and one could argue that, yeah, they need to be increased, but equally the system is being rigged and skewed in the favor of foreign money so that the locals are being bought out essentially. So you can see where there's a little bit of animosity, and it's no one's fault. It's not the locals' fault, it's not the tourists' fault, or the people who want to relocate here, the immigrants and expats. But when you arrive here, you're playing into that, and it's unfortunate. So it's a delicate balance to appreciate and honor the culture that you're stepping into, by also doing what's right for yourself and your family. And so we thought at the time that this was the best decision for our family, bringing us closer together. And some of the things I think are really important to consider before you move abroad is, what are your goals? If you're single and or just a couple and you can do whatever you want and you're fluid, that's awesome. Great for you. If you're a family who wants more permanency, what are your non-negotiables? What neighborhoods do you want to live in? Why are you leaving? And I think the very best place to start is what works for your family. Like, where can you go with what you do know? Is it easier for you to move somewhere because you have a cousin, an aunt, an uncle that can, sponsor you or vouch for you? Are there certain things that you need? Are there certain things that you want? Are you looking for a more nomadic lifestyle where you only spend several months here or several months there? All of these are options. It's just a matter of what you want and how you want your life to look. For us, it was really important that we found a school that our son could transition into seamlessly. He was in a Montessori. We found a Montessori in Spain. We wanted an apartment that was big enough, that felt comfortable, but was also city-centric, that had access to the metros and downtown things. And we found a beautiful apartment and loved living there. But sometimes things change. My husband's still in that apartment, and it's beautiful, but it's right in the middle. So there's lots of chaos. There's lots of noise. And for our dog, especially during big festivals like Las Fallas, it's impossible for him. He's so stressed out. So I ended up moving into a smaller apartment. And that's the one thing too I will say that is very similar as well to the US. Apartments are also very flexible in terms of what you're going to be required to pay and what you get back when you leave. So we moved into our first apartment, and we had to pay 6 months rent in advance. And a lot of this is because we do have, and so that was extra and a guarantee. And we didn't necessarily know what we were going to do and if our visa was going to get approved, to be to be honest. And then we didn't know if we were going to like it here. So it was almost like we came in and weren't sure it was going to be approved, but we knew we were going to at least try to give it a year as long as our visa was approved, and then go from there. And so that's what we did. And so we had to pay 6 months for this first apartment. And when I moved into my apartment, I had to pay 2 months rent plus a brokerage fee. Now I am told, and I haven't looked into this either, but that these brokerage fees are somewhat illegal. Like they're not supposed to be profiting, but I don't know all the details on that. So it's just something to consider. Maybe you can find loopholes, or maybe the laws have changed and these brokerage fees are essential now. For me as an American, I was very aware that this happens in New York and other places. Like if somebody is helping you find something, you're paying for that brokerage fee to be the liaison. Sometimes they don't do much. Like in my case, when they're looking for an apartment, I found the apartment, I went to check it out, all of the things. So they're not really doing anything but being the mediary. And even when I left the apartment, they didn't do anything there either except show up with the owner to do a walkthrough, and that was it. So yeah, some things, doesn't matter where you are, they're still the same. So there's that. One of the things that is essential to do here as well, when your visa is approved, you get something called a NIA, an NIE number, and that is basically like your social security number. And that gives you, your NIA is tied to your visa, so it's like what kind of visa you have, what you're allowed to do. So like for our visas, we're allowed to work, and so it will say on our card that like it's called a TIE card, so the NIA number goes on a TIE card. And our card will say, like, basically in Spanish, like the right to work. So that's something you have to send up at the Ayuntamiento, the city hall. Register yourselves with the city hall. And that's called empadronamiento or padrón. And so the padrón here in Valencia, they release appointments like every Thursday, and you sign up and then you just go in, you get your ticket number. And it's always good to have a previous appointment because you get seen faster. And then you just have to bring your documentation, like what's most important is like your passport, your NIA or your TIE card if you have it, but usually takes several months to get that. So it's usually your passport when you're first arriving. And then any other documentation. So like if you're trying to padrón your child, you need to have both parents present or fill in the form that allows you, like for me, in my case, I would have to probably have my husband sign the form that said, I'm allowed to padrón our son to be a Spanish resident because he's never here. And then you submit all your documentation. So like I have friends who brought like just backup documentations, birth certificates for their kids, just to be fair, or just to be cohesive, as well as, are you paying bills? Sometimes they ask for, the deposit, like, transaction records to make sure you're paying who you say you're paying, and it's not some kind of scam. So the money's going to the person you say it's going to, and you're paying the person you say you're paying, and they're receiving it, and, because there's taxes that are involved with all of this stuff. So they make sure that it's legit. So they might ask you for bank statements or something like that, or just transfer documents or whatever. Who knows? So off track. I have appointments can be hard to get depending on what you're trying to sign up for. So whether it's a NIA card, the TIE, or any other government thing, they can be very hard. They go really quickly. Just something to consider as you navigate the system. And one of the things like I've always really loved about Valencia is people tend to be really helpful here as long as you are appreciating the culture and you're being respectful. It's one of the things I love the most about living in Spain is this community and their culture and their dedication to their traditions. I've talked about it a lot, how much I love like the fallas and falleras and the whole tradition of burning it down. And it's gotten a little out of hand from a sustainability perspective, but that's a different podcast for a different day. But it's also just, maintaining that legacy of roots and, knowing that paella is from here and all the different rices. Like I've never seen so many different types of rice until I lived here. And, going into the grocery store for the first time and seeing like oh my God, I can't say it, but like all the different jamons, and they have like everybody was like it's like a very specific thing of how to slice jamon correctly, and it's a craft, and just honoring that, I think it's just so beautiful, and it's lovely to be a part of that and witness it and see how the history and traditions have endured despite hardships. I'm kind of just avoiding the conversation. The next part of this conversation. I think the best way to start this is to say that this is my personal perspective, and there's only so much I can say because it's a ongoing situation that has not been rectified at this point in time. But one of the things, and the reason that people have been asking so much about my experience here is because several months into our move, my husband and I separated, and it was a very difficult choice to make. Anytime a relationship ends, it's never easy or simple, but I really feel like our relationship had been eroding for several years. And when we moved, I remember distinctly in our kitchen in Florida saying, like, please don't let this job become more important than the family. Like, please make sure that you don't lose sight of what's important. You know, you lost yourself in the other job and they discarded you. If you lose yourself in this job again, like, that shows me where I rank, not just me, but us as a couple and a family. And from my perspective, while I can admit that he's always been a really good provider and a really hard worker, I really felt that he lost. It became really clear to me that I was not the priority for him. I guess that's the best way to say it. And I do have, obviously, my part in the downfall of our relationship. It's not just one-sided. And I think that's what I would say is that moving abroad is not for everyone. Like, it takes a lot of grit. It takes a lot of tenacity. It takes a lot of everything. And it can be the best experience of your life if you let it be. And it can also be an opportunity to realign if you find yourself misaligned from your goals, or your people. But that is not what happened in our case. And so very quickly when we left and we're settling in here, I realized that we were just very misaligned and that there was no recourse to realign, unfortunately. And so somebody had to make the tough decision, and I made the tough decision. Maybe that will bite me in the ass one day, but yeah, it's been really tough to navigate that. And, you know, our son moving to a foreign country and then all of a sudden his parents living in different places and he's trying to learn a new language and a new school and make friends. And then all this fighting's happening with mommy and daddy. And it just wasn't good for anybody. And removing myself from that was a difficult choice to make, to say the least. So that's what happened. As I said, we're still navigating it. Luckily, we've been able to maintain some level of integrity towards each other. Doing something like this really far from home as well. People are like, why don't you just go back? It would be so much easier. And yeah, in a way it would be really, really easy. Really, really easy. But in another way it'd be really, really hard. And right now our son is settled and he is happy, and that counts for a lot in my book. And keeping him safe, stable, and having consistency in his life is my top priority, as well as for myself as well. And yes, my estranged husband has always been a really good provider, but because of this, it's really helped me reassess who I am, my part in things, where I fucked up, my opportunities. I don't think I would have seen certain things had we stayed in Florida. I think I would have chosen to be comfortable, blind to my own evolution that was required for me to be a better person, a better partner, and a better mom. And I would also add that the last 6 months have been some of the most deeply transformative for me for other reasons. But anyway, because of all this, I started grad school so I could pursue a career in ecotourism and sustainability. Valencia happens to be a really incredible place for that. There's lots of regulations in the EU that they must follow, but Valencia as a city and a community, because Valencia also refers to like several provinces as well as, I'll call them provinces. I'm not sure that that's like the exact technical term, but several provinces. And so it's not just the city, it's also the region. And they are very dedicated to sustainable tourism, sustainability as a whole. And I think that's such a marvelous thing. See, especially coming from the US, because we don't have the same affinity for composting and recycling and this, you know, we don't follow the Paris Accord. We don't believe quote unquote in certain things, but they are happening, and coastal erosion is a real thing. Even like living in Florida, you can see it. And to deny climate change is like to say there's no sun in the sky at this point in time, in my opinion. So as the Earth goes through natural heating and cooling patterns, we can still do our part, even if it's like having a reusable cup every day. That's, you know, one small little thing that we can do. And I'm not going to get on a soapbox about that. Again, different topic for a different podcast. But being here and knowing that there's tons of research papers, whether they are implementing that research into their own models and their own festivals, I don't know about that, but Valencia is a hub for the study and the execution of a lot of sustainability and ecotourism. because there's a lot of things in this region that need to be preserved. And a lot of companies, Spanish-based companies, but particular my favorite hotel group, the Melia Hotel Group, they have a lot of sustainability practices built in. They have a very, very robust program. And so just knowing that the companies here are very thoughtful about the longevity, not just of today, but also of tomorrow, I find that very encouraging to move forward. And I have said so many wonderful things about the Valencian community. I could keep going on about it, but one of the things that really just drew me to here is the spirit and the ethereal presence that they have. There's just this, like, it's not quite whimsical, but there's this beautiful energy of the locals. And again, they're very welcoming, but very protective of their traditions. And as somebody who's lost a lot of traditions and things along the way, I really value that. And I love that my son can witness it and see, how generations, get out every Sunday for their paellas, and how families are part of like a falla, and I don't know, businesses are thriving, and, people are they're so creative here, and there's so many talented people within this city. It's absolutely amazing. And of course I miss the USA. Absolutely I do. Off the cuff, I miss like peanut butter cups. It's a big one. I miss everything bagel seasoning salt, although a friend just came back from the US, so I am stocked up on that. I miss random things like that. Sometimes I miss a car, but I actually really enjoy biking everywhere. There's 200 kilometers of bike lanes. I think it's 200 kilometers of bike lanes in Valencia. And I probably biked, good 75% of them. And some pathways that probably were not on the map, which is really awesome. And I love being able to get to a lot of different cities in Europe. I think that's really cool. It's been a great gift for my son as well. And a couple things I find really interesting about living here, though, too, is, some things will not fly. Like in the US, you can't just park on a sidewalk. People park on the sidewalks all the time here, or they stop they pull their car over to get out and run into the bank or a store or something, and they have their flashers on. You can't do that in the US. My favorite thing, and I think this is a European thing, not just a Spanish thing, is the way they walk in the middle of the street, not to one side or the other, but in the middle. I find that so intriguing, and it's almost like they know you're coming, and they just weave back and forth. And I'm just can I just get past you? I'm not trying to be rude, but I have other things, and I've lived in the city for so many years of my life. I want to get where I'm going. Tranquila. And my dog, anytime they would see my dog, they were like, oh, madre mia, que grande. And they would see me walking down the street and still be surprised at this massive black fluff ball when they approach them. And Dio thinks that everybody is his friend. So he's like, I'm here. And some people don't like that. Expense-wise, it's certain things are a lot cheaper. Grocery stores generally are cheaper, but clothes are more expensive. So that's, there's some balance there. I've talked a lot about how cheap the insurance here. We had to have private health insurance for our visa, and it's 3,000 euros a year for a family of 3, and we were paying over 600 a month for 2 people that had barely no coverage, and most things are covered here to a certain extent. You go in for a dental checkup, you're fine. You have to pay for the extra stuff for any cavities or fillings or crowns, but it's a fraction of the cost. So Declan had 4 crowns put in, and I think it was less than 300 euros. So the insurance in terms of coverage is similar in the US of what is covered by your insurance is slightly different person to person for whatever plan you provide, but the cost associated with it is nominal compared to the US. There's lots of pharmacies here too, although none of them seem to have the prescriptions that I need, but that's neither here nor there. So, I feel really grateful for the life that we have created here. And I think the best thing I could say to somebody is know what's right for you and your family, know what you need, and have your non-negotiables tethered to your plan. And also know and be open to the fact that your plan might not work out. You might hate it, because it's not all Aperol spritzes and paella by the beach, It's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are still schools, there are still bills. Banks, I forgot about banks. Setting up a bank account was really fun here. Theoretically, my husband was supposed to do it because he's the visa holder, but there was some kind of loophole, and she was able to set me up with an account, probably because I was a stay-at-home mom and I needed access to money. So I was able to get my own bank account. And so that was a little different. But when we first got here, we didn't have a bank account. And so you need bank accounts to set up bill pay, auto pay, stuff like that, to get, a Spanish cell phone. But you need your NIA, and you need, other documentation to like set up the bank account. So it's like, you need the phone so that the bank can text you to set up the bank account. So there's like this chicken and egg thing. And really what it comes down to is somebody being able to help you or willing to help you. My husband, my estranged husband, he set us up with a nickel account. And so that was how he was able to set up our cell phones when we got here in our internet. And then we could go and set up the bank accounts. So it's like a process. And I think that's the thing you have to remember is like, it is the same in the US, but we're just used to it. I've run into the same issues. It's just more aggravating because I don't speak the language fluently, and that can definitely present some problems. But at the end of the day, we were fortunate enough to know we knew that we needed a great school for our son that would be easy for him to transition to. And if you listen to his podcast, you can see that the friend thing was a big thing for him in the long run. We knew we wanted to be closer to the beach. We knew we wanted a city, but not too big of a city. So we didn't move to Barcelona or Madrid. We wanted to be by the beach. I think I said that. We needed to be close to the airport. We wanted public transportation so that we did not have to take or get a car. And then I'm also the only one with a license, so I would have been the one driving back and forth or having to go to driver's ed. I've been driving for 24 years. I don't want to go back to driver's ed. Anyway, entonces. I also think being here has really humbled me to a degree. Like, I thought I was a very empathetic person, and I realized I have a lot more opportunities than I thought. I thought I was a very accepting person, and then I've realized there's always room to grow. And it's humbling when you're on the receiving end of something. Like, I remember being in university, and there's a couple bar backs at one of the bars we used to go to. And my girls, Caitlin and Jen, will definitely attest to this. And I would always speak Spanish to them. My really bad Spanish, because like 20 years ago. And I always admired them because the one guy would send money back to his family in Honduras, and you're just like, wow, crazy. And he lived in like an apartment with like 6 other people. And they were all doing the same thing to try to give their families a better life. And so anytime I would go in there, I would speak my bad Spanish, and he was always really kind to me. And then come to find out he lived in like my same building. And it was just crazy and super, nice and interesting guy. And I thought I was empathetic, and then being here and being on the receiving end of that grace and that understanding has been a real education for myself. And I find that I speak differently to people. I find that I am more relaxed than I used to be. Some would say I could probably relax even more. I am a lot more patient, and I don't rush quite as often as I used to, which is a good thing. And so there's a lot that I've been able to learn about myself and note the opportunities that I have had as a person to make myself better, again, all around, as a mother, a person, a friend, and maybe eventually a partner. So we can talk about that podcast another day. Guess stay tuned for that. Crap, I guess that's all I can really say at this point in time. So I hope you learned something you didn't know you needed to know. I will also say that this life is not for everybody. It takes a lot of grit. It takes a lot of tenacity. It takes a lot of dedication and a lot of self-reflection. And while it seems like a beautiful adventure, it is, if you let it be. But it's also one of the hardest things I've ever done in my entire life. And a lot of that has been on my own. So it is what it is. And I'm grateful for it, even with all the pain, even with all the suffering, even with all the heartache. I am very grateful for the lessons that I get to learn and the person I get to be and how I get to grow. So, anyway, I hope whatever journey you're on, you get that same zest for life, and you remember that, because this is something I keep telling myself every day. It's a ride, and we're here to enjoy it. So wherever the road takes you, whatever path you choose, just go all in, because it might be something incredible. So until next time, start learning all this.